You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Check, check, 1, 2. Look like a little country, some rock and roll and blues. 'Cause we sure love playing for good people like you. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.
Welcome to Music Local and Sustainable, the radio show that features discussions with and the music of local musicians. I am your host, Dave Lake. Tonight, I am in the Carol A. Carter Recital Hall of the Foy Fine Arts Building on the campus of Georgia Southern University, talking with the members of the Elaris Duo, Dr. Larissa Elisha, violin, and Dr. Stephen Elisha, cello. Welcome, Larissa and Stephen.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave.
Working as a duo, you have to work out the music from two different perspectives. What goes into that?
Of course, we have to use our experience as individual soloists because that is an ensemble of soloists. And after we cover all these points as individuals, then we have to think how that will fit into each other's part and how that will become kind of one. When nobody's taking just turns, but one complements another, and how we can create this complete picture or complete story by playing together. And that is not only to speak the same language in terms of articulations and dynamics, but that to have the same set of thought and heart and understanding and feelings about the piece. I think we were fortunate that we never had problems with that because we are compatible in our own musical background and in our approach to learning the piece and preparing the piece and performing it together. So it's hard to tell how that would be if that would be in different setting. But I had experiences playing in different ensembles with different players, and that is not such easy process for several people to become one. So I think that is the most important, to serve composer, not to come on the stage with your musical ego, but to really advocate for what is in music and how to present that to make it very special for our audiences.
Is it easier to do two people than it would be three or four? In other words, as a duo, do you have an advantage over a trio or string quartet?
I think the advantage of a duo, particularly since it's the two of us, is that we found very quickly on how compatible we were on almost every level. And that kind of compatibility, when you start adding players, becomes exponential. And not all ensembles have to be great friends. They can coexist and perform on a very high level as high-level professionals. And we have an advantage. Not only are we advocating the highest level of professionalism, but we have similar tastes in music. We have similar tastes in sound concept. And that's a very difficult thing because sound becomes a very personal entity. It is the fingerprint, so to speak.
DNA.
The DNA of a musician. And we both gravitate towards a similar type of sound. So when we play together, it becomes one instrument as an extension to another instrument. And that is exciting. It's a very exciting process. And so when we are rehearsing, so much of our rehearsal is nonverbal. It is a journey of pursuing a piece that is unfolding before us, and we may perform something dozens of times, and every single time we approach it again, we may find yet another expression of something, or a deeper expression, or there's a timing that seems to be different. So it's never stagnant, which is great, and it's always exciting and refreshing. And I think to have that with a fuller ensemble, let's say a string quartet, well, then you're dealing with the variables of two other people, and it's everyone's individual artistic contribution, but then it becomes a singular contribution of the entity of that ensemble. And it also has to be based on repertoire that you're playing. Some repertoire lends itself to more complexities, and other repertoire is a little bit more simplistic. And so perhaps the more simplistic repertoire requires that much more individual imagination. Other pieces are in themselves so amazingly imaginative that the pursuit is just to find a closer meaning to what the composer's original intentions were.
And I just wanted to add that being in a duo, we have the opportunity to explore duo repertoire, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were playing another group. But it doesn't mean that we do not collaborate with other players. We love to perform with other players in string quartet, or we like to expand it, and there are piano quintets and piano quartets, and there are possibilities, of course, of piano trio, which we do a lot. And usually other musicians who play with us, they are usually mentioning that it's easier to play with us because we are already a unit of performers. So I think that is a benefit when we want to join other players. That helps.
So if you're in a string quartet, it may actually be only three parties.
Exactly. Well, it has been a huge benefit when we have collaborated with another violinist and violist, the string quartet entity. Well, first of all, we will usually command a certain interpretation of the piece because half of the group is already going.
Two boats.
He's got two boats going a certain direction, exactly.
And usually that requires less rehearsal time.
How do you seek what you think is the composer's meaning in a piece?
First of all, most of composers, they really write clear messages for us. If that to read carefully what is in music and just to follow the score, we can learn a lot. Besides, there is always some historic moment in the life of composer, in many cases life of country, let's say, when we're dealing with pieces, for example, maybe not for duo, but when we're dealing with pieces of Shostakovich, for example. That is all related to other situations, and just deep knowledge and knowing connections, sometimes just knowing who this composer studied with, and influenced by other composers, like in the case of Kodai, being influenced by Debussy, knowing about folk music, and working so much with Bartók, that gives us kind of insight how that should be performed, and what kind of visual images, literally, from the sounds we want to present, because that is so lively.
One of our favorite works that we perform is the Kodai Duo, Opus 7. And that is such a rich work. And to understand it completely, you have to understand Kodai's style. It's a very particular style. It's a specific understanding of linguistic characteristics, because Kodai was very much involved in the language aspect of his culture. The Hungarian language had very, very specific specialties that other composers may not have had. If you think of composers of the classical era, that was very objective music, and Romanticism started gaining more of a personal language. But then when we get to 20th century music and the landmark works that presented a cornerstone of style. Kodai's Duo stands as one of those landmark works that influenced so many other composers afterward. For instance, Ravel's Sonata for Violin and Cello, very much influenced by Kodai. Honegger's Sonatina. You take this genre of violin and cello and you put it through Kodai's voice, and when you listen to it, you can imagine not only two instruments, but perhaps an entire symphony of instruments performing, because there's so many different sound colors, so many different timbres, not to mention the linguistic aspects of declamatory style, where things are perhaps sung and then things are perhaps even spoken, where there are long soliloquies, and then there are vocal expressions of cries and sobbing and screaming for joy even. We performed this not too long ago in a performance where an audience member came up to us who happened to have been Hungarian, and he was so ecstatic about hearing this that he said that he felt like kissing somebody and dancing and laughing, and all his emotions were sort of enlivened because of this music. And I don't think there are many pieces written for string chamber music that can compare to that level of emotional expression and musical profound message.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just characteristic of Hungarian composers or Czech composers, where they introduce so much richness of the musical foundation of the folk music into their work. I sort of think, from the American perspective, maybe Charles Ives would be a comparable individual, trying to incorporate the wealth of folk idioms into that. But you flip through the list of Dvorak, Bartók, Kodály, the richness of the musical foundations of the country by listening to the composer.
Exactly. And most of all, the development of revolutionary technique is very new technique that he's using. And that is very unusual if you look at all other duos that were written before. We don't have anything like that. So usage of so many double stops, chords, pizzicatos, harmonics, many technical things that make it sound sometimes like another string quartet.
The simultaneous playing with the bow, arco, and pizzicato at the same time, for instance. That's fairly unusual and also not easy because the coordination that's required for that is much more demanding. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, after hearing the Ravel duo, I wanted to go back and listen to the Ravel string quartet because a lot of the techniques were so similar between the two.
Yes.
Well, it's the second movement, I think, of the string quartet.
The pizzicato.
The pizzicato,
Yes.
It's just so...
And a duo as well.
Yeah, and the duo as well,
That's the pizzicato timbre was so important to Ravel. But again, we have to draw upon the primary influence of both Kodály and Ravel, and that's Claude Debussy, who broke away completely from the traditions that existed in the Romantic and classical realm. And here Debussy is introducing harmony not as a function but as a color. And the same aspects of that are very much part of the Kodály duo and the Ravel sonata.
Yeah, and dynamics as textures. At least I feel it this way. That is really much of textures and many kind of water-like elements.
Take the second movement, for instance, of the Ravel sonata. There we have a movement written specifically in two separate keys at the same time. So this polytonality idea is quite ahead of its time. And it's not until we really get into Stravinsky's music that we have a full-blown idea of that. But here, both instruments are in separate keys, and it's a kind of a teasing game. Even the type of melody that's used is reminiscent of a childhood teasing, na-na-na-na-na-na, this kind of thumb-waving kind of melody. And the pizzicatos are kind of this alternating competition between the two instruments.
innovation is so well integrated that people don't hold their ears and go
Not
out
at all.
screaming saying, that's in two different keys. Unlike their reaction to other composers who perhaps use polytonality, but in a more dissonant, unresolved sort of approach where people find it negative, but in Ravel they find it intriguing.
I think because when things are musically convincing, then that is received differently. It's coming different way because that is so convincing, and that makes sense. It's not just done just for a certain technique of composer. It's done for kind of larger cause.
I think we have to keep in mind also that his sonata for violin and cello was experimental. Later on in the works of Stravinsky, it was much more of a statement. He was trying to make a case for polytonality. And in this case, it was more of an experiment, and it was a playfulness about it that gives it a less of aggressive, strident appeal. Well, there are some shocking things in that movement, but it's, I think, all meant in jest. It's very, very comical.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. If you enjoy the programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Basic memberships begin at only $50. Additional membership levels are available. And monthly or recurring donations are welcome as well. To check out our membership rates and to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select your preferred donation level. Again, to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. You're listening to Music Local and Sustainable, and I'm your host, Dave Lake. Tonight, I'm talking with the members of the Elaris Duo, Dr. Larissa Elisha, violin, and Dr. Stephen Elisha, cello. Well, one of the things I liked about your performance at Mikveh Israel as the duo, the repertoire that you were performing. For your average concert goer, many of the works you played were probably obscure, not easily recognizable. How do you put together such a program, knowing full well that many of these works may be obscure, that many of the composers, in fact, may be obscure? How do you put together a program that you know is going to be very contemporary, it's going to be very...
I think it's our responsibility as performers to educate our audiences. And if we know that this particular audience is not familiar with these works, and we don't know how they will be reacting to it, of course there is some element of risk if that would be really what they wanted to hear, if that is exactly what they would enjoy. But if they will never get the opportunity to listen to it, how would we know? And we know that was incredible success, and we know that all these people kept talking for a very long time, and they're still talking, and they're excited, and they love it. And sometimes not everything can be really understood. That should be accepted on some internal level of feelings, and that is a level of education and understanding. And of course, we try to start from something that more maybe palatable, right? We start with Boccherini, and we could definitely include Beethoven and Mozart and Haydn.
Yeah, works that we already recorded and we've performed on several other occasions.
Of course. And when we were doing interesting presentations on different places and conferences, when we were talking about how violin-cello duo genre was developing.
The evolution of the genre.
Yes, of the genre, and how to evaluate techniques in how to present different techniques and different pieces and how that is changing. In a way, we have to take a risk and present something. Because some people will come to the restaurant and they will order the same thing every time. And some people will get adventurous and they will try something new. And it's kind of like to develop wider menu and musical desires. And at the same time, I think those are great composers. And Schulhoff's piece is amazing. And we felt that this music must be heard. And we have to present that. We spent time recording it because we felt that that is really worthy for our audiences to hear that.
It really drives me up a wall when people demand the Beethoven. And I don't want to say I love Beethoven. The opening concert of the Savannah Philharmonic this year had Beethoven's Third. I mean, what could be more heard? The Third.
But what's ironic about that is that when the Beethoven Eroica Symphony was premiered, it was scorned at. It was thought of as the worst symphony that had ever been created. It was considered to have been 45 minutes of unrelated, disorganized themes. It was panned beyond recognition. And yet, today, it is an incredibly popular work. I think there's always an element of risk. That's the wonderful thing about performance, is that it's an experience of chance of sorts, because it's a live presentation. When you go and you purchase a CD or other media, you are able to choose exactly what you want to hear whenever you want to. There's nothing unpredictable about that. And you can choose it from the piece to the performer, right down to the smallest consideration. When you go to a concert, well, that's a live experience. And live experiences cannot be scripted always. But I think because the fact that the works that we were presenting were not as well known as others, or just the genre itself, when people go to a chamber music concert, they're more likely to go to a string quartet or a piano trio, something of this nature, because the repertoire is that much more extensive. Composers really were following a genre that was not abandoned. The violoncello genre was very popular in the Baroque time, and it was then somehow replaced by the string quartet. The string quartet sort of emerged as the chamber idiom of the 18th and 19th century. And so it was not until Kodai that the violoncello genre pretty much exploded again as a very interesting genre. And as a result, there is a plethora of repertoire written for the violin and cello duo from Kodai onwards. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to have the luxury of picking one of many Beethoven trios. Well, he wrote 3, and we recorded one of them.
And we did perform.
And we performed all of them. But
yeah.
And there was a Haydn duo. We recorded that. You know, whatever was then, we've played it, and it's wonderful things. Playful. They're delightful. They're entertaining. But sometimes we need to present to an audience not everything that is easy and entertaining, but something that is meaningful and sometimes requires a little bit more thinking and consideration. And when you consider works of Schulhoff, the first thing that comes to mind is what?
His story.
Not just his story, but
the Holocaust.
Exactly, where did he die? He died in the Holocaust. And that's already a very uncomfortable subject. Not everybody wants to think about the Holocaust. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be presented. It doesn't mean that people should be guarded from this. In fact, that in itself gives every reason to present that as often as possible. But the fact is that Schulhoff was a phenomenal composer. And the fact that his life was ended so early on, we have such a responsibility to present his works because he didn't have that opportunity of a lifetime to be known. And just because he died in the Holocaust and because he was a composer that died in the Holocaust is one thing, but he happened to be a wonderful composer. and his music is deserving of notoriety.
Do you enjoy Zingareska from Shulkov?
Oh, that's a good one. Let's do the
Do you
Zingareska.
enjoy Zingareska?
Yeah.
With third movement as well, that doesn't have any subtitles, of course. But for me, third movement is like I would name it in the Garden of Dreams. It's kind of exotic and dreamy and very special.
I mean, not every composer can enjoy what Franz Joseph Haydn enjoyed, which is a long life, and where he was actually celebrated before he died. He was the most popular composer in Europe at that time.
I don't believe that Schulhoff is really so obscure, and I have to defend our audience at Mikveh Israel, because some of members were talking to us when they found out what we will be playing, and they said that they're looking forward to it because they know about Schulhoff. So I found that maybe somebody doesn't know, but what can we do about it? I remember we performed when we just started performing a lot of Kodai Duo. And some people really know about this piece and some people don't. And we performed a concert in Florida. And I asked Stevie and I said, are you sure we want to include this piece in this particular performance? Because we have such huge repertoire, we can do something else. And we took this risk. And we were just shocked, not only how much people loved it, but we had audience members coming to us afterwards. And they wanted to see the music, the score, because it was so busy. That was so many things. They wanted to see how that looks and how that is in music. So that was really interesting, that sometimes we are underestimating the depth and level of understanding of our audiences. And I think it's better to present, and it's our responsibility to make it attractive enough and make sure that that will be understandable.
I mentioned to my wife before we went how poignant doing the Schulhof at Mikveh Israel was. And before you did the piece, you put it in perspective. I think it was just so important and so valuable.
I think that helped decide on that piece as well, that the venue seemed to be an appropriate place. Because the first time we performed it, we were invited to perform a concert to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht. So we needed to look for works that would be appropriate for this event. And so the Schulhof was one that seemed to be a perfect opportunity. We knew about it, we had worked on it, we fell in love with the work, but we felt that that would be a really appropriate place to do that, because Kristallnacht, of course, was the beginning of the end. And when you have a specific event, such as commemorating Kristallnacht, then of course you will choose a program that will complement that event. Other ways in which we present pieces would be to show the evolution of the genre. So therefore we would start with the Boccherini, go through the Mozart, Beethoven. Yeah. So there's a transition.
But then there's the big gap.
There is a big gap up to a point, because we can definitely explain that even though the musical language changes, the instrumentation doesn't. So there is a thread that goes through the entire thing. And there is the interchange, because it is two instruments that immediately evokes the idea of dialogue and interchange. And so you demonstrate from one piece to the other how a composer deals with that dialogue in the classical realm or in the 20th century realm.
I thought of this as the perfect pairing, because it's more of the male voice and the female voice back and forth, and that conversation back and forth. And you had the visual of that as well as the auditory exchange between the two. And to me, that benefits the music. I'll watch music eyes closed, because I'd rather concentrate on what the music is doing rather than necessarily the performers. But in this case, I think it added to the conversation.
Yeah, and there are many love duets. If you will take second movement of Brahms' double, with this continuous conversation, that is definitely something very special about kind of men's voice in the reply.
It's a love duet. At one point it goes into some sort of maybe heated quarrel, and then definitely a reconciliation at the end.
And that's the double concerto.
That's the double concerto.
Yeah.
By Brahms,
Yeah.
I wonder how much the background of the performer, the schooling of the performer, the ethnic characteristics of the performer, and pointing at Larissa, your performance of Shostakovich are widely praised. Does ethnic background play a role in it? Does your training play a role in it? Or do you feel it more than others? Or?
There are many things involved, but I think I was incredibly fortunate to study with great teachers, great performers. And that's why actually I feel like that is my responsibility to teach, because I need to pass it on. And I feel that I'm continuing traditions of legendary Russian school. And we're talking about new school when we're talking about the Yankelevich and Oistrakh. I was so fortunate to be able to hear stories that she would tell me what Oistrakh told her about a particular piece, because he was closest friend of Shostakovich. And when you find and read stories that are not available in regular books, are not available in analysis of musicologists, and sometimes that referred to as very special information that somebody shares with you, suddenly you discover different world. You know exactly what that was about. In a way, knowing real history of the country, and knowing not only about Shostakovich but about Rostropovich and Oistrakh and about other musicians and politicians and writers and poets and about everything that was happening in their lives, you realize how incredibly powerful and brave it was for him to write what he was writing about. Because this condition of socialistic realism, when he was presenting and trying to present things and even writing music for some movies and plays, at the same time he was real citizen of his country, and he was presenting incredible ideas. He was talking about things, but that was presented like that was something else. But because I had this kind of very direct influence from musicians that knew exactly what that was about, I felt that I had this incredible window opened in front of me, that I knew what I was playing about. When you know that you're playing Shostakovich's first concerto in cadenza that takes place as a separate movement, even so powerful, and when you know about knocks on the door, KGB knocks on the door at night, and what that exactly means, and what exactly this moment means, and what that is dedicated to. And you start kind of feeling it so much that it becomes kind of part of you. And Shostakovich was paralyzed in late years of his life. And it was remarkable that he would say to his friends, I am really very happy that I don't have to shake hands with these people. There's so many things that he had to go through, so incredible pain as a person, as citizen, as musician, as friend of all these wonderful people. So just knowing about that, I think that we're so fortunate that we don't have to deal with exactly this situation, but we can present it through the music and know what that is all about. Because we have to kind of live through certain condition in order to start feeling it right and presenting it right. Because that translates into particular sound, into particular timing and meaning. And it's really important to know the history behind it.
And how do you transmit that? The fear of the knock on the door, the pain of not being able to do what you want to do because of that fear? How do you translate that into someone who've never experienced that, who have no clue about that?
I think I'm privileged to work with young people, and that is a wonderful experience. And I'm coaching the Honors Magnolia String Quartet here at Georgia Southern. And it's interesting that we're talking about Shostakovich, because on their program now they're performing Shostakovich Quartet number 8. And that is exactly the piece where you have a title that is dedicated to victims of fascism and war. And yes, it is. And that is dedicated to everybody who was taken out of their bed and homes with this knocks on the door, and that is right in this piece. And I am trying to explain all that to my students, and it's hard to tell how much they can take to heart, because you don't want to make them start feeling pain that they're not responsible for, and they don't have to really relate to that personally, but at least through playing music and finding certain colors, hopefully that makes some impact in their maturing. And someday when they will go and listen to cello concerto, violin concerto, or piano trio by Shostakovich, or maybe they will be playing a symphony by Shostakovich, they will know how to apply techniques, they will know exactly what they're playing about, they will connect things. And I think they're doing an excellent job performing that and understanding that. Who knows what they really feel, but I think when I am sharing with them what I can share, I think that is impressive in a way that they can translate that into sounds and playing.
But one thing that is really, I think, important, and it's very important to us as a duo, is the fact that we both come from very, very distinguished and legendary traditions. These traditions that are no longer possible because the people that we were so influenced by are no longer in this world.
They're gone.
They're gone. And we are the next generation to carry on the traditions and the teachings and the beliefs and the knowledge that these people had. So we have huge responsibilities to carry these traditions forward. I think music has a way of bridging generations more than perhaps any other realm. When we perform a piece of music, we are in a way creating that bridge of the past to the present and hopefully to the future.
Tonight we have been in the Carol A. Carter Recital Hall of the Foy Fine Arts Building here on the campus of Georgia Southern University with the Elaris Duo, with Stephen Elisha and Larissa Elisha. And I want to thank you so very much because I've really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We're delighted to be on your show.
It was wonderful.
This has been another edition of Music Local and Sustainable, and I've been your host, Dave Lake. Save this time for another show next week.
Well, I know we ain't headed for the Hall of Fame. Gonna give it what we got, man, that ain't no shame. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1.